verse 8 continues. It's not just a global graveyard, a fourth of the earth to kill, global warfare with the sword, but with hunger. There's going to be global starvation. Jesus describes a time coming when there will be a worldwide famine unlike anything the world's ever seen. Why? It says that the fish of the sea are going to die. It says that there is going to be a huge price just for a day's food. I mean, right now, all of us can just buy massive amounts of food. But it's slowly changing. Do you remember last year there was a little run on rice? Because there was a little typhoon activity that kind of upset the rice markets. And you couldn't buy 25-pound bags of, probably most of us don't buy 25-pound bags of rice. But you couldn't just go to Sam's Club and get 25-pound bags of rice because there was a little glitch in the supply system that we all rely on so much. Well, it's going to stop. And there's going to be global starvation. Turn over to chapter 8. I mean, we could go through all of the seals, but look at chapter 8, verse 7, because fourthly, there's going to be a global browning. Now, you hear about go green. And by the way, we should be good stewards of the environment. Christians do not waste. Christians do not just destroy recklessly. We do not believe that you just throw trash and pollute and everything else. If you are godly, you are redemptive. Godly people are not indiscriminate polluters and litterers and everything else. There's a restraint to us. We aren't animals. So we're not opposed to ecology in any form. God made it. It's beautiful. And we do not needlessly destroy and exploit and ruin and pollute. You know, the Lord said those that go in and put their dirty feet in the water and make it dirty for everybody else are not His people. He was talking about muddying the waters theologically, but there's a beautiful lesson there that we are living as a part of a whole world, and we should be the most gracious of all and the least wasteful. But there's not a global greening coming. There's a global browning coming. Look what it says in 8:7. Jesus described a time coming when, it says in verse 7, the first angel sounded, hail and fire and followed, mingled with blood, and that was thrown to the earth, and a third of the trees were burned up. A third. Can you imagine what that would do to our whole CO2, O2, the whole deal of photosynthesis and the way that our atmosphere is renewed? A third of all the trees will burn up. You know how much smoke that is? Have you ever lived out west where there are big grass fires? Do you know there's signs all along the highways in Oklahoma, don't drive into the smoke? We used to laugh. We'd say, drive into the smoke. What, is someone smoking a cigarette? What are we talking about? Until the first time. You get prairie fires, and you just can't drive. I mean, you can't see. And it gets so you can't breathe. Because it's just smoke everywhere, and you don't know where to go. And those are just little localized, a few square miles of grass burning. How would you like a third of all the trees to burn? Smoke, soot, deprivation of oxygen. Can you imagine what it's going to be like during the global browning? Not just a third of all the trees. It says all, look at verse 7. All green grass was burned up. Right now, the mayor of, is it Phoenix, Tucson, I don't know which, is paying the people $1.50 a square foot if they'll get rid of their lawn and put rocks down. Because they don't have enough water to water all these lawns. They're paying homeowners to get rid of their grass. Well, they could save their money because a global browning's coming. It's going to all die. It's going to all burn up. Can you imagine when all the grass burns up and a third of all the trees? Can you imagine? It's going to be like living in Peking right now, or Mexico City. Mexico City is so bad with pollution. You put your bird outdoors in its cage, it dies. It can't breathe. It just suffocates the birds. The pet birds, the canaries, they just die. It's unbelievable. Can you imagine when the whole world is like that? Global browning. Look at verse 12. There's what we would call global nuclear winter. Jesus describes a time coming when the sun and moon will be darkened as nature goes into revolt. Can you imagine when it's dark? When the sun and moon reduce, as it says in verse 12, then a fourth angel sounded, and a third of the sun was struck. So the radiant level of luminosity of the sun is diminished by 33%. A third of the moon because the moon is not a light giver, it's a light reflector. So obviously, which by the way is another proof of inspiration, who but God would know that the moon was merely reflective and that it would wane at the same rate as the sun? Amazing, but there we go. A third of the moonlight will be diminished. And also a third of the stars, could be the smoke cloud or whatever, so that a third of them were darkened and a third of the day did not shine, likewise the night. So it's going to be this kind of gloomy. And can you imagine what's going to happen to the weather? When the radiant luminosity of the sun is not warming the oceans and the air, because the whole system God made is that there's all this weather change because it gets cold and warm and the wind moves around and the cold air drops and the hot air rises and we have storms and then the rain comes and it cleans the air and it gets all pure. And here we've got all this smoke in the air and all of a sudden it starts getting dark. It's just like a global nuclear winter.